All righty. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Kobe Sconard, CEO at IdeaWake, and I have a lot of content to cover, so we're going to dive right in. And goal of the session today and overall theme is building the business case for running challenges, hackathons, or Shark Tanks within your organization. Overall agenda and what we'll be covering. First, we're going to kick it off with several examples of companies running these types of events successfully and the ROI they're receiving from them. We're going to then go over a 6-step process to create your business case and specialize it to your organization. Then we'll cover how to address the most common objections that leadership's going to provide when pitching these events and how to address each one of them, how you can put some of this advice into action, and ultimately have a question and answer session at the end. Outcomes for today, and really what I hope to leave you with, is just give you the resourcing that you need in order to get your first event off the ground and build a business case and get the buy-in from leadership for it, or help you run recurring events with different departments you might not have been able to tap into before. Once again, we'll do this through examples, understanding how to project the value for your organization, and looking like a rock star to your leadership team. So to kick things off, just starting with the value that these types of events can deliver to your organization. And for those that regularly attend the webinars, some of this might be a repeat for the first about 2 minutes here, but we will get into several new content. So employees do have ideas to improve their companies. We do our own primary research. So we most recent study we did interviewed 700 employees throughout the continental United States. 62% of those employees had ideas to make their organization better. 84% had a clear understanding of challenges facing their company. Then most importantly, and why a lot of these events are pitched in the first place, is that these events can help materially improve employee engagement. These ideas do go beyond HR improvement, though, and this is really what we want to make sure we're projecting the value of based on our event that we're running. And everything from saving time, growing revenue, saving money, and improving customer experience. To go into several examples now, some of these companies are large, some of them are small, some of them are customers, some of them aren't. But just Amazon Prime, one of my favorite stories is that Amazon Prime was actually an idea from a software engineer submitted early on when Amazon was on its way up. And that just produced, over 5.2 billion, I believe, in 2019 Q4 revenue. And now it has over 150 million customers paying worldwide at the end of 2019. Southwest basically has $140 million that they attribute annually to annual value from employee ideas. And one of those ideas was, how do we make the process, for onboarding folks when they're joining a plane more engaging? And so actually the fun, and quippy intro announcements or safety announcement that you hear on Southwest was actually an employee idea and really employee empowerment in the organization. Xerox had a Going Green campaign, resulted in over 10 million, 200,000 in savings for waste reduction. And they run this event annually. It was most recently over 2.6 million pounds of waste eliminated annually from the program. KLM had an issue where they were trying to reduce plane turnaround times, and it was at 50 minutes, and it was one of the highest in the industry. They were able to reduce it down to 35 minutes, which is in the top 10%. And this was once again all driven by employee ideas, resulting in millions in savings from the organization, often from places that you least expected. Exam one, another great example. So they were able to reduce their operating margin by 2%, which was 1.4 million in savings in 6 months after implementing a continuous improvement program. And we're able to engage 78% of frontline staff in the program. Then InSinkErator, which is a local manufacturer, is able to save 800,000, 50% participation rate from employees across 151 ideas within the first year of implementing one of these programs. Once again, for starters here, it's just nice to show examples of companies that are doing this and gaining success from it. We do have one more here, which most folks are probably familiar with on the call, which is Costco. So it was an employee idea that they don't always need to be complex. So basically, they were able to save 560 truckloads by taking cashew canisters, and instead of making them, round, which they just suggested making them a square instead, so you could fit more canisters per truck. Once again, over 560 truckloads in savings per year. Something else in terms of the benefits of these types of programs, clear communication is key to engagement, but often this disappears in general when recessions happen or when times of economic uncertainty come up. And just to show from Recruiter, and this was actually sourced by Gallup as well, 30% of employees said lack of open, honest communication has the most impact on morale and overall experience. And just an example of this from last year would be Coinbase. So they had an 18% workforce reduction, which is about 1,100 employees in 2022. Most of the folks that got laid off did not hear about it until they saw it on the news. So they heard about it on the news before they actually heard about it from the CEO or the employer. Many didn't even end up getting a note from the employer, which is really crazy to think about. So really having an open line of communication is key. And the problem is a lot of the time organizations, when you're pitching these types of events, don't know how to actually turn the employee engagement benefits of these programs into dollars and cents. So what we're going to do now is look at the hard costs of employee disengagement and turnover. So on average, $3,400 of every $10,000 spent on an employee's salary is lost due to higher absenteeism, lower productivity, and lower profitability. This means at a 250-person company, you're losing $3.16 million annually just to disengagement. And to show that running these types of events and programs can help materially improve employee morale and engagement, Gallup did a study. 30% of workers strongly agreed that their opinions counted at work. And how this study worked is that they did a large industry study. It was cross-functional in terms of the industries that they looked at. And they looked at the bottom quartile and top quartile of performers. Bottom quartile, only 30% of employees thought that their opinions counted. And looking at the top quartile and doubling that to 60%, they on average saw a 27% reduction in turnover, 40% reduction in safety incidents, and a 12% increase in productivity. Just to show a real world example of this, so Palisades Tahoe was able to improve employee learning and engagement by 74% in 6 months after implementing their program, and it was just standard innovation challenges all ran digitally. And they were able to collect 226 ideas, implement about 25 or 28 of them, and had about 65% of their organization actively participating. So now going to the bulk of the presentation here, looking at the process for building your business case. We have a 6-step process here. It's going to vary organization to organization. You might have a standard process that you have to go through, but this is just really to help translate the benefits of these types of initiatives and events into dollars and cents for you. So our 6-step process is identifying the scope of your event and which areas the organization, whether it's departments, business units, or the organization as a whole, could sponsor it based upon mutual goals. Understanding what solutions are being proposed today to actually achieve the goals that you're going to be targeting. Then going about building the business case and showing that the ROI from this can be comparable to or better than the other solutions that are being considered. Understanding the resourcing, planning for objections, and then actually delivering your pitch and setting next steps. So first step here, identifying the scope and sponsors. And overall, what we found is that innovation programs oftentimes do not have mutual goals with business units of the organization. And so really what we want to do is understand what company-wide goals are, what business unit goals or department goals are, and the KPIs that they're specifically being measured on in the short and long term. And then understanding what your specific innovation program goals and KPIs are as well. Once again, the issue is that business unit goals are solely or most of the time, focused on hitting quarterly and annual projections, whether that's operating margin or revenue growth. And innovation program goals, if you are tasked with implementing innovation in your organization, are looking at longer term, larger projects that are going to disrupt the business. And so because of this disconnect, we're often seen as another thing to do, and we can't help them achieve their short or medium term goals. And so when we try to pitch these types of events to them, they're just looking at it as another thing to do. We need business units to be on board with us because they ultimately have to pilot the stuff that we validate and take those successful pilots and integrate them into operations. So if we're just seen as another thing to do, it's not going to help us, get to where we want to be in terms of running these events. And also, it's going to feel like an uphill battle the entire time. So to get to our destination, what we want to do is try to identify, which is very difficult. Step 1, criteria or KPIs that meet all 3 goals, where they align with the company, the business unit, as well as the innovation program. The second step is going to be looking to things that align with company-wide and business unit goals. And then the third step is going to be looking at specific business unit goals with the innovation program goals. So one of the actionable steps that we have today that we'll send out after the presentation is just a matrix that we've created that can help you identify which departments would be best to approach, or business units. You can interchange department or business unit, whatever area or level of the organization that you're trying to align with. And what you're going to see is you list off your departments here in the rows, and then you look at alignment with short-term and long-term KPIs, as well as leadership team support for that specific organizational unit. The totals on the right-hand side are going to give you your department alignment. And then on the bottom, it's going to give you the overall organizational alignment of your innovation program goals with company-wide goals. So once again, we'll send this out afterwards. No, this is a lot to take in at once, so we're going a mile a minute. Understand what solutions are being considered to achieve those mutual goals would be step 2. So ultimately, we're going to get into this more when we talk about the objections that are most common, but really, right, folks are considering when you're pitching these types of events, what are the alternative priorities, and are they going to more likely help me achieve my goals in the short and long term than the innovation events that we'll be running? So the entire goal of you presenting a pitch is, right, is to get folks to think that innovation events are going to have a better ROI than alternative priorities, and that ROI has to be tied to what's going to help that specific leader, put it candidly, right, get their quarterly or annual bonus, right, or to help the organization succeed as a whole. But really what we need to do is, how do we present our innovation events in a way that folks believe that can sponsor this, they're going to produce a better ROI than alternative priorities or alternative initiatives that they might be considering. And that's ultimately, right, what the goal is of our pitch. So going into projecting the benefits in dollars and cents. So just looking at best practices, and we do have several resources. Just for sake of time, we couldn't go too deep into calculators themselves, but we have about 10 different templates for calculators. So if folks are interested after the presentation, please just reach out to me at kobe@ideawake.com, and we can help share some of those out with you depending upon your specific organization and situation. But really what we want to do is always figure out how to put things in dollars and cents. I can't tell you how often I see folks when they're pitching these, right, it's not put in dollars and cents. And if you don't have exact numbers, that's one of the reasons folks don't have things in dollars and cents. You're not going to be able to project for the first one of these that you're running what the value is going to be. But what you can do is paint a picture and tell a story by providing a range or a value. So like I said, we'll follow up with some additional resources on how you can go about doing that. But you want to project those conservatively. And it's a good idea to include engagement and retention benefits on the pitch and pitching the ROI of these events. But oftentimes it's the only thing that folks are presenting. And then once again, if folks don't have a goal of improving engagement or retention for that specific quarter or year for their business unit, they're a lot less likely to sponsor. So it's good to include it, right, as part of the benefits, but I would not include it as the sole benefit or sole piece of ROI that they're going to get from running the initiative. So just looking at, turning some of these with the time that we have, like for examples, we start off with simple and go more complex. So for reducing error rate by 5% would be, let's say, just a KPI that a business unit's trying to achieve. It's understanding what's the cost per error and then projecting a range of what types of ideas we could collect to reduce error rates between 1 to 2 or 3 to 4 or 4 to 5%. And then actually looking at what that value is in dollars and cents and presenting that back. For reducing customer churn, in order to present this, you need to know what's the total cost of customer churn. For employee engagement, like I said, that's normally not the main thing that's going to be presented as the ROI. But if you're pitching to HR, it actually might be. So it's looking at what's the cost per disengaged employee. And then for improving customer experience, this is one that comes up all the time in terms of goals for the organization. It's really understanding what is the KPI that's being measured on. So in our example here, we said, what's the current upsell rate today? And hey, if we could improve the upsell rate by 5%, what does that mean in dollars and cents to the organization? In terms of understanding resourcing, step 4 in the process here. So for sake of time, we're in the beginning of the presentation, we're talking about innovation challenges, Shark Tanks, as well as hackathons, which are 3 distinct types of events. So what we're going to do is present the stakeholders here and just high level timeline, because the timelines for these events often do follow a pretty similar course. But then what we'll also do afterwards is provide some more specific resourcing information on what you'll need and the critical things you'll need for each one of those types of events. So looking at different stakeholders, they're listed here. Senior leadership and having their buy-in, whether it's at the business unit, department, or organizational whole level, is key for any type of initiative that you're running. But this kind of just goes through all the different types of stakeholder that you would have. And this also breaks out the timeline. Timeline could range or vary week by a couple of weeks, just depending upon your organization and your goals. Once again, this is just meant to help provide a first level pass for you to start building off of. Once again, this is another resource that we'll be sharing after the presentation for folks. If it's possible, try to start simple and identify low-hanging fruit. Specifically, one of the objections or one of the pushbacks that you'll get from leadership when pitching these events really happens right here under the prioritize and implement. And it's always project dependent, right? If you start with simpler projects, if you've never ran these types of events before, there's often going to be low-hanging fruit that you can go after. And that's going to produce measurable dollar ROI. And this kind of goes into the next part, which is planning for objections. So the most common objections that we're going to hear, whether you're pitching innovation events or whether you're pitching, a new, any type of new software or system, it's not the right time. We need to finish other priorities first. We don't have the process or resources to take action. Employees don't have good ideas. That one's pretty rare, but it's often, said quietly or, said by other things that folks are saying in terms of their feedback they're presenting. And then the last one, which is super common, is our culture isn't ready. So once again, going back to the goal of our pitch, right? We need to make sure that the innovation events and alternative priorities, the innovation event that we're going to run is going to be seen as more valuable than the alternative priorities or alternative initiatives to achieving our short-term goals for our sponsor. So whenever we hear it's not the right time, or we have to finish other higher priority projects first, really what they're saying is that we think that the other things that we're doing are more likely to help us achieve our short-term goals versus running an innovation event. So what you can do to address this is go back to the drawing board in terms of looking at what ROI you can provide and finding a lot more examples. And there's several use cases online for these events and the ROI from them. I provided about 8 examples up front. A lot of the time, though, going back to those analog examples and presenting those to leadership gets them excited and starts to shift the scales in terms of looking at innovation events being something that will be comparable to or more beneficial than alternative initiatives or priorities. So we don't have the process or resources to take action on ideas. This goes back to starting simple. So we have this framework, it's called the walk, run, scale framework. And so it's a lot of the time best for especially getting started, even when you're running these programs on a regular basis, to focus on things that have low complexity to implement, low time to implement, and don't cost a lot of money to implement. I know that that's not rocket science, but a lot of the time, because our innovation program goals are to be disrupting the business, we ignore a lot of the quick wins that we can implement that are going to help our business unit leaders achieve their short-term goals, ultimately helping us build a buy-in to run more of these events. And this is the framework. I know there's a lot of text on here. Once again, we're going to share this out after the presentation, but this just kind of helps walk you through what the different phases you can go through are. So when you're getting started, folks are expected to deliver on scale, right? A lot of the time, but really you only have the resourcing to walk. And so what this helps do from a framework perspective is identify, hey, who's going to be doing the work? What type of evaluation criteria do we need to be considering for judges or for leaders when they're selecting which concepts to move forward with? And then ultimately give you the buy-in that you need to get to the run or the scale steps in the framework. So for employees not having good ideas, if that does come up, you'll often hear it indirectly by hearing some of the other objections, like we have other higher priority initiatives. Really, one of the things is that somebody's not going to come up with an idea that's better than what we're already doing. So basically what I would suggest in that scenario, and just in your presentation, is to make sure to provide several examples of larger companies running these types of initiatives that folks are going to have name recognition with. And Amazon Prime is a great example. Flaming Hot Cheetos is one of my other favorite examples, but there's a lot of examples that people can relate to in their daily lives that you can use in order to show and build the business case of, hey, employees actually do have good ideas. Those ideas can be disruptive, or maybe they're quick wins, but they're a different lens that others and leadership might not be considering because they're not on the line doing the work every day. Just a tip here. Make sure to plan ahead for your objections, and we'll close this out in a moment with going into what to include in your pitch. But make sure that you're planning for these up front. most of the time you're going to hear it's not the right time, or we have to finish other priority or higher priority initiatives first, are the two most common, most likely that we'll hear when these events are presented and pitched. So make sure to present or plan for that up front, and make sure to have content prepared in your presentation addressing why it's the right time and why this initiative, like running this initiative, the outcomes and outputs from it could actually achieve our KPIs more effectively than the initiatives that we're doing today. So if you're able to do that and present that in a concise fashion, it's going to go miles in terms of you getting to a yes faster. Going to the last step, which is your pitch itself and setting next steps. We do have a pitch template that we can share out with folks. But really what I wanted to include for sake of time here is to just give you the high level of what we covered today. So it's making sure to include projected value that your event can provide in dollars and cents. And if you can't figure out how to put something in dollars and cents, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to help. Making sure to address those objections directly in your presentation. And then the last piece, which I so often see, and it's difficult to do because you're often pitching to a group or a room of people, but have a clear plan for what the outcomes and the next steps of the meeting are. 90% of the time, you're not going to be getting to a yes, let's do this in your first meeting. So one of the next steps could just simply be getting another meeting set and getting the buy-in from leadership to have another meeting where you can address any objections that you were unable to address during the initial presentation, or to answer any questions that they have, and then try to get a meeting with their admin set during the meeting or immediately after it. Oftentimes when you present something, people will say, great, let's consider this and we'll come back to you. And then it goes off into the ether and gets brought up annually and you have that same conversation. So just making sure that you have clear and concise next steps. Once again, those next steps, I would try to make them not just be, let's get to a yes. Instead, it would be, let's get a follow-up meeting set to get a final decision on something. So no, we just went through a lot of content in a short period of time. Hopefully that was helpful for folks, but do want to open it up for question and answer. And like I said, we'll have several resources to help you put this into action that we'll be sharing out afterwards, and just really an overall framework that you can use in order to present things in dollars and identify which stakeholders could sponsor, how you present things in dollars and cents, and compare them to other initiatives that might be getting considered, and then ultimately how to set that meeting, address objections, and actually get to a yes. So once again, thanks everybody so much for taking the time, and we will open it up for questions. And in order for me to do that, just to make sure, I gotta stop sharing my screen here for a moment. Pull up the Q&A chat. It's always the dangerous part of opening it up for questions. But if there aren't any questions, hope that the content was valuable for everybody. We'll just give another minute here to see if any come through. But thank you all for joining this morning, afternoon, or evening, and taking the time out of your busy day. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll follow up with those resources for everybody shortly. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll close things out. Bye now.